Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the 5 tips to have effective meetings. Do more with less time. Every single person that I know of had a meeting that they wanted to escape from. It either went too long, didn't have an objective, or was just a waste of time. Meetings are a great way to get people together, have a plan of action, or make quick decisions. But sometimes it can turn into a disorganized mess if the person who's running the meeting is also disorganized. And also if the meeting was planned poorly from the beginning and there weren't clear objectives. Even in professional and business type settings, inefficient meetings can happen all the time. It is not unique to any circumstance. Where there's people, there's bound to be ineffective meetings. So I want to distill down the knowledge I've learned in the past 10 years on how to run effective meetings. I've participated and led many different types of meetings where things weren't really clear or people didn't have an objective. And I also had the experience of running ineffective meetings as well. So hopefully by the end of today's video, you'll be able to lead and be in meetings that are more effective in nature. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about why meetings can get derailed, my tips on running effective meetings, and my general thoughts on meetings. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And here we go. So first, let's talk about some of the background into meetings. So for the purposes of this video, when I'm talking about meetings, I'm talking about generally a gathering among people to discuss issues and problems. And usually at the end of the meeting, the people in the room come to a consensus on how to proceed next. It can either be a one-on-one situation or a group of people in a conference room. The number of people in the meeting generally should be kept lower so to avoid crosstalk. So now let's talk about why ineffective meetings happen. Number 1, poor knowledge. Many times I've been in a meeting where we did not know something and we could not proceed further into the meeting because of it. It didn't matter how many people were in the room or what was discussed. Somebody lacked a critical piece of information and we could not proceed without it. This could have been at work, on a call, or informal situations. This could have been because we lacked somebody's contact information, a key piece of knowledge, or we just didn't understand something properly. And it was a struggle for us to move on after we identified what we were missing. So we just kind of muddled along or we just ended the meeting early. This was usually very hard to overcome because we didn't have that person readily available or that key piece of information available to us. So we had to cancel or postpone the meeting until further notice. Number 2, wrong people in the room. Sometimes we just didn't have the right person in the room with us, either because they were personally unavailable or had other obligations. Pre-pandemic, when people gathered in conference rooms or had in-person meetings, this was a problem. It was usually hard to coordinate and get someone to confirm appointments at a certain date or time. This can also be the case where everybody in the room is also the wrong person. Sometimes there was a key decision that needed to be made with the people that weren't available at the time for that specific meeting. When you're trying to solve a problem and you don't have the right people in place, it can sometimes be next to impossible to try to resolve it. I've had meetings where we didn't have the right people in the room and the team struggled to figure out a solution. And it wasn't really clear to us who we needed in that room to resolve that situation. For this situation, we can usually resolve it fairly simple. We just need to identify the person that we need and then get them to confirm for the meeting. Usually we have to reschedule so that all the key players are in the same meeting. And number 3, lack of reasons for the meeting. There has been many meetings that I've been a part of that had no certain agenda. This was usually general team meetings where people just come together, chit-chat, and have a good time and go on tangents. There was really no reason for that meeting to occur, and it just wasted people's time. And there was also times when there was no clear agenda before the meeting was sent out, and so you go into that meeting completely cold and not knowing what to expect. And in those meetings where I go into it completely cold, I usually lack a key piece of knowledge to make me efficient during that meeting. So I end up struggling to be effective during that meeting and providing people key pieces of information that they might need. In some cases, particularly one-on-one meetings, it could have been resolved over a phone call or email. There was no real reason for having an in-person contact. Most issues could have been resolved in a one-liner or in a 5-minute conversation. Maybe it's good to have that face-to-face contact, but for something really short, then the meeting is a waste. So now let's talk about the 5 tips for effective meetings. Number 1, have a meeting agenda. Always have a meeting agenda in place before the meeting occurs. Have a few bullets or talking points so that you know ahead of time what you're going to be talking about once you get into the meeting itself. And in addition to that, always let the other people in that meeting know what exactly you're going to be talking about as well. This way, when people get to the meetings, they don't have to spend the first 15 minutes figuring out what you're going to be talking about. They know ahead of time what it is. Half the battle of an effective meeting is to get everybody on the same page before the meeting starts. Because if they're not on the same page, you have to spend precious time getting them on the same page before you can actually get to your talking points. It also helps you to stay on topic and not meander around. People can generally have a lot of topics and tangents that they can go on during the meetings. With an agenda in place, you can focus and hone in on the most important topics. Many of the ineffective meetings that I've attended in my life could have been more effective had the organizer had an agenda in place prior to the meeting. Number 2, designate a note keeper. One of the biggest keys to running an effective meeting is to have someone take notes of the meeting. Taking notes will help you so much on the back end after the meetings because people will always come up to you and ask questions about that particular meeting. Either people didn't attend the meeting, forgot what it was about, or had certain actions that came after the meeting. It's a good idea to have notes in place so that you can answer their questions. By doing this, I was able to resolve all of my team's follow-up questions, and I was also more accurate because I didn't have to rely on my own memory of the meeting. Meetings can be quite long and talk about a lot of different things, so having notes in place will ultimately help you to keep track of what went on. So number 3, know when to move on. In almost every meeting that I've attended, there's always some person that goes off on a tangent and spends 10 minutes talking about some obscure topic. In many cases, that 10-minute tangent could have been 30 seconds or a minute max. The best way to handle this is to have someone in the room identify it and then call it out and tell that person to talk about it later. This ideally, of course, should be from the organizer of the meeting, but it really can come from anyone. As long as you acknowledge and realize that this is off topic, you can tell that person to continue that conversation somewhere else. Although I will have to say, in a few cases, you can let that tangent conversation continue. It might be important tangentially to that meeting, but in most cases, recognize that it's taken away from your meeting agenda and shut it down. This does, in general, require some social grace because you're basically telling that person to shut up. So take care in your delivery when you're telling that person that they need to move on from it. So recognize when a conversation has derailed and do your best to corral it back to your meeting agenda. Number 4, bring the details. Knowledge is power, both personally and in meetings. Having the critical details or information at your fingertips will help make the meeting more efficient. Many times in meetings, people go off of their memory or what they heard from other people. They don't actually have the facts in place to back it up. And they often suggest that this is the answer, but they have to go and verify it later. Speaking from experience, people rarely verify that information at a later date. They often just forget about it. I've been guilty of this as well. There's been many meetings where I did not bring the information to the meeting and I did not know what the answer was. I had to go off on my memory and verify it later. If that happens, you might have to reschedule a meeting because certain pieces of information are just not there and the team can't make a decision to go forward. So bring as much information as you can to the meeting, either as the organizer or as the individual person attending the meeting. And if the meeting organizer gives you an agenda prior to the meeting, then it's even easier for you to gather the relevant information for that meeting. And number 5, don't have a meeting. The most efficient meeting that you can have is the one that didn't exist in the first place. You didn't have to spend a single minute in that meeting. Do your best to resolve the issue before calling a meeting in the first place. Meetings are really good when you're trying to resolve a complex issue and you require different specializations from the people that attend. But it's terribly inefficient if you gather a whole bunch of people in the same room to solve a simple problem. Meetings can be wasteful if it's something that can be resolved by a simple email or you require only a fraction of the people that you ask to attend. As an organizer, it's really hard work. You have to create an agenda, take notes, and keep people on task during the meeting. And if you can save all that time and effort by not having the meeting, then it's better for you. So think about whether or not you want to have this meeting in the first place because it could save you and other people a lot of time. So here are my general thoughts on meetings. I don't like meetings at all. I don't like running them. I don't like to be participating in them. Even though I'm much better now running meetings than I was when I was younger, I still don't like doing it. Running an efficient meeting is a lot of work, especially if there's a lot of people in that room. The more people there are, the harder it is to corral everybody to get them on the same topic. There was many meetings that I've attended where it was poorly thought out and didn't really have an agenda. Running inefficient meetings is really easy. You just have to come cold, unprepared, and get people in a room and just talk about whatever. Had the tips that I suggested been a part of those inefficient meetings, there would be less meetings overall in the first place. And really the culprit of this is poor planning and documentation of the meeting. If I do have a meeting and can't get out of it, I try to do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Get people in, get the answer, and get out as soon as possible. I try to make my meetings short and sweet and to the point. I don't want anybody in my meetings thinking that I've wasted their time. I know people dread meetings in general, so I do my best to make sure I don't use the full allotted time. I always try to be under that. So those are some of my general tips on running an effective meeting. Many of the countless meetings that I've attended over the past decade of my life were not efficient at all. The main culprits were poor planning and lack of documentation. People didn't know what the meeting was about going into it, and then after the meeting, they couldn't remember what it was about. To run effective meetings, the organizer must have clear reasons for having the meeting in the first place, and having the right people and information in that meeting so you can come to a resolution much quicker. So I really hope that from this video you can learn how to run effective meetings and you can avoid some of the pitfalls that poor, ineffective meetings have. So thank you for watching. Be sure to leave me a comment down below on what was the worst meeting that you've ever attended and what would have helped make it better. And I'll see you next time.